artificial intelligence has obviously been evolving at a rapid pace, and what we've seen is that the models are becoming more and more advanced, and what's happened is there's a set of data that can be used to train those models to create a more efficient and accurate response. And particularly when you look at what we're doing at Archer, because we've been doing this for 20 plus years, we have a set of data and historical data that we can use to train the model to ensure that it is highly accurate. And we take that one step further by not just relying on the data to train it, but having experts in the loop that can review that data and that output for consistency, accuracy, and reliability. Ultimately, it's not too different from partnering with any other type of business. It's about creating trust between the organizations. The more trust that we have with each other, the more we can work together to provide valuable inputs and outputs. And what I mean by that, the best outcomes come when we're able to not just look outside at an organization, what's happening in the regulatory landscape, but starting to understand their own data and their own structures. And we can leverage the tools and the technology to not just take regulatory inputs, but look at their own internal policies, their own internal documents. But none of that's possible without having trust. Trust in the systems, trust in the platforms, and trust that we can work together to solve the problems that they're looking to solve. So I think that idea of trust is what's going to become more and more important. People will gain more trust in the models, they'll gain more trust in the providers of that technology. And particularly for us, we have, as I said, this rich set of historical data that allows us to train our models to be purpose-built to solve regulatory problems within the sectors and industries that we work in. But I think it needs to go further than that. Most of the providers out there are looking externally and getting whatever public information they can get to make those decisions. But when we can take a look at that data and look not just at the public data, but at the private data that exists within the walls of that organization, their policies, their controls, their issues, we can start to draw correlations and not just train the model, but put comprehension behind the model. So the model can start to act, think, and make decisions like the organization would. But none of that's possible without the trust that I previously mentioned. But I think that's the next level, establishing a deeper set of trust, and then being able to move from just a knowledge ingestion and an output to a comprehension and an understanding. I think that we currently exist in a bit of a land of uncertainty when it comes to regulatory requirements. We have certain countries that are de-escalating the regulatory needs. We have other countries that are increasing the regulatory burden. And I think what's important is being able to understand that regulatory changes in general have the same impact. Whether it's less regulation or more regulation, both of those are opportunities to look at how RegTech can help. Because if there's a less of a regulatory burden, organizations want to understand, is there opportunity to optimize their burden and lower down their cost? Likewise, if it's increasing in another area, they want to be able to make a decision. And I think operating on a global scale and seeing a divergence in those regulatory landscape is going to be really important for organizations, particularly multinational ones, so that they can put the right focus and the right emphasis within the areas of the business to ensure that their cost of controls and cost of managing risk is adequate for the regulatory burden that they face. Yeah, I think back to the idea of trust. I think Global RegTech Summit has a role as a facilitator of trust. Trust between the regulators, trust between the businesses, trust between the technology providers. Ultimately, to really get full-scale value out of RegTech and being able to ingest all this data, it requires sharing of information. So how do we benchmark against each other? How do we benchmark against peers? How do we benchmark against competitors? And in order to have that, we need an open dialogue about the benefits. And I think this event allows us to come together and create and establish that trust that's so important for the growth of the industry and the sector.